Namaste and welcome to the Healing Mirror podcast. My name is Saraya Saraswati, and here I'm offering discussions, global satsangs and interviews with spiritual teachers, philanthropists and awakened and inspirational humans. And today I'd like to introduce you to a non-dual teacher who has followed the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. He was ordained as a monk in 1978 and lived as a celibate for 9 years. He then completed a PhD in the philosophical psychology of the Mahayana Buddhism in 1983. So I'm really very happy to introduce you to Peter Fenner. In 1986, Peter began offering adaptations of the Mahayana wisdom to mental health professionals. His workshops integrated the Buddhist non-dual wisdom and the understanding of group dynamics. He subsequently founded Timeless Wisdom, a California non-profit organisation which offers contemplative dialogues and retreats in Australia, the US, Europe and Israel. Although that could have gone online now, so we'll find out soon. Peter's written and authored many books, which include Radiant Mind, which is one that I've listened to on the Audible offering. Also, Essential Wisdom Teachings, The Edge of Certainty, Paradoxes on the Buddhist Path, and The Sacred Mirror, Non-Dual Wisdom and Psychotherapy, which is interesting because this podcast is called The Healing Mirror. So I really am very honoured to introduce you to Peter. I'm sure he has a lot of wisdom to share with us today. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. So Peter, welcome.
Saraya, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. Great appreciation.
So Peter, I believe that you are Australian initially, is that correct?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
And you're in Australia currently, aren't you?
I am. I've been here for about the last 7 years. Relocated from Washington, Seattle, Washington, back to Australia.
Oh, I didn't realise that you'd been here that long, actually. I thought you'd just come back during this COVID period. Okay, so you've been in Canberra for that time, have you?
Not all of that, Brisbane and then Canberra. I have 2 grandchildren living in Canberra.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, well, our grandchildren are very important, aren't they?
They are.
I have one and one on the way. Delights.
Wow.
Yeah, the little ones can show us how to be present so beautifully and so simply.
Yeah.
So I thought I would ask you, first of all, to just share a little bit of your history. What called you initially to the Buddhist path? And I believe that could have been in Udlo at Chinrezig initially, but I'd like to hear a little bit about your story to start with.
Well, Tibetan Buddhism just a little bit before that, 1 year before Udlo and Chinrezig, but again through Lama Tubten Yeshe, the very dynamic, charismatic Tibetan teacher who, when I first saw him at an ecumenical meeting, talk he was offering at Monash University in Melbourne, I was stunned, blown away, thought, wow, this is superhuman. If I can, how did he get there? If I can take a few steps along the path that's given him such exuberant joy, dynamic energy. That is what I need to give my life to.
That's really beautiful. I had a similar experience myself that drew me to the spiritual path until that path ended, of course. And I wasn't around here then, but for those listeners who may not know, the Chinrezig Buddhist Institute is in Udlo, which is very, very close to where I live. And perhaps you can tell us a little bit about your time here.
Well, that's going back to 1974-5, meeting Lama Yeshe, and then knowing that I had to ask him if he would be my guru. That's really all I knew. That was the question. I had to somehow ask of him, and so I went to Chenrezig in Udlo and had a meeting with him and asked him if he would be my guru, and he said yes without a second thought. That was one of the wonderful aspects about who he was. He never had to think about anything, second guess. He seemed to know spontaneously what was the right thing to do and what was the right path for people to follow. And so that changed my life. He said, yes, and I would like you to teach Dharma, the essence, the meaning of life in a university setting. So do your PhD and become a teacher, lecturer, professor, and teach Dharma. And I thought, wow, does he know what he's asking of me? He's he's defining the next 20, 30 years of my life in one sentence. But when someone of his caliber and stature, a great master, says, yes, I'll be your teacher and this is what I want you to do, that's what you do. You don't start thinking, do you really mean that? Would you like to think about that a second time? Can't I negotiate that with you? That's not how it happens. So yes, then I, as you mentioned, proceeded to do my PhD, essentially in the theory and practice of emptiness, the emptiness awareness tradition in Mahayana Buddhism, and then taught for many years at Deakin University, East-West philosophy, world religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, and then started teaching independently of that environment, because being a university, it's by definition intellectual, and I knew that in my heart I wanted to offer something that was transformational, experiential, changing people's lives.
Wonderful. That's beautiful. And I think it's important that for the teachings and the understanding and that opportunity for the transformation to occur, it seems to appeal to a wider audience if you do have that intellectual standing, the PhD after the end of the name, etc. A lot of people will then be attracted, whereas they may not be otherwise, which of course you and I would know is irrelevant. But it does give a higher standing, and I'm sure that the university would have been uplifted by the sharing of those teachings as well. But I thought, let's just go back a little bit, because some of our listeners may not necessarily understand some of the language that you and I may take for granted. So I just thought we'll just use that word guru to start with. Now, guru can be translated as dispeller of darkness, high spiritual teacher, just to let people know that. And then the other word that we have been using is dharma. And well, I'll let you explain that one.
Well, dharma is what the fundamental spiritual principle, and within dharma you have also the idea of sanatana dharma, the eternal dharma, the dharma that can take us, as you're saying, from darkness into light, that can take us from suffering and open up our lives so that we can tune into fundamental principles of existence and follow those, and progressively become more content, more satisfied, more available to other people, a better resource for ourselves and others, and ultimately leading into liberation, a space, a state where we could say from time to time, nothing is missing. We get a taste of arriving at the end of a spiritual path.
And that's where the path ends. And that was a huge revelation for me after being many years on a spiritual path, and would have called myself a seeker for many years, even though the teaching and the truth was right there, presented in front of me the whole time, until I suddenly had the realization that it's right here, right now. It's the gateless gate. It is the extraordinary ordinary. But applying those principles of dharma and non-duality, and disidentifying with the separate individual self, once they are really embodied, or to use that term, but lived by, then this wonderful sense of freedom leaves us without a path, doesn't it?
Right here, where we are now, the space we're sharing, yes, there is no path and also no goal. It's what's sometimes called being without a reference point. Looking inside, if we look at where we are, where am I, it opens into a sense of vastness, not being able to find a localized place where we are, no boundary between inside and outside, between self and other. So yes, that's what we know, what we can taste and enjoy. And then, yes, it's how do we make this available more continuously in our own lives? How does this become embedded as like a solid foundational constituent dimension of who we are, and how is this naturally, easily shared with those we meet in our life?
And this I know for me is the highest heartfelt desire, to use that word, is to be able to share that, because I think once we've had this beautiful glimpse, then how can we not want to share that and to help others to experience that? Something I was reading, something that you wrote the other day, and it was written so beautifully, and it really touched me, and I felt it instantly. And that is that when we enter this beautiful space, and I'm using my words, not your words, this beautiful space of openness, and oneness in that non-dual, expansive, limitless space, that we actually there experience the deepest and most profound intimacy.
I think that's how it is, because when we're here, there's nothing to defend. We're not defending an identity, a projection of ourselves. We're not engaged in wanting to be seen as a particular person, to be appreciated, admired. We're not wanting to hide what we might think otherwise are defects or deficiencies. So I think that does open up into an intimacy. People can enter into us, and somehow, yes, there's a depth to our own interaction with others.
Well, there's this sense of there is no boundary between here and there. There is no boundary between me and you, or whoever that is. And in our human context, when we're identified as a separate body mind, the idea of intimacy is quite different, and it's a limited understanding of intimacy. It's more into me see, whereas intimacy is that beautiful melting away of the boundaries that separate us. It's beautiful. Very, very deep if we let that just sink in for a moment. And
it is depthless. There's no end to the depth of the connection and relationship that's possible.
It's a very, very special and beautiful thing, and so precious and delicate, yet available to all. And sorry, no, you go on.
Incredibly precious. Like, people don't appreciate both what you're saying, the delicacy of this, that it's not easy to come by this. You can say, yes, this is our natural state. Most people miss it for different reasons, distracted with the complexities, the demands of life. But also, there's the way that this is invisible, what we're talking about, what we're sharing. It's not obvious. That's also why people can miss this.
And in this world where, at the moment, the way it's expressing, it's very visual. The media is very visual. There's Instagram, there's Facebook, there's all sorts of things, Flickr and this and that, and it's all just so visual. And I think in that, sadly, perhaps we're losing that ability to relax and go within. There's always this projection outward to see the new, the latest thing, and not to miss out on that. And that outward projection is a distraction from this beautiful, deep inner place.
Right, distracted by sense phenomena, as you're saying, all the visual phenomena, but also distracted by our minds, by our thoughts, and by the feelings that are happening in our body. But so easy to live a life of total distraction. Relative to this, most people live a life, and I live a life, of great distraction, thinking, I have to do this, I have to do this. Following thoughts and thinking, I need to think about this, this needs to be done. It's so easy to miss this through just thinking it's more important to give attention to the objects of awareness rather than awareness itself.
Yeah, beautifully put. And these, of course, we have the senses, and that sense of sight will then ignite the mind with all of the mental vrittis and the samskaras and impressions and patterns of the mind, and then that will ignite our emotions and so on and so forth. And yes, it is really, I suppose that's why I still, although I understand that the non-dual path is often very you know, put forward as the pathless path and the gateless gate, which I totally understand. However, I think it's really important that, like, you know, sowing my vegetable garden, I prepare the soil well first. I add some fertilizer. I take out the weeds. I let the land rest for a while so that it can be ready to receive those seeds. And I think with our meditation and our relaxation and the work that you're doing and you're offering, Peter, this is such valuable, you know, soil preparation, isn't it?
It is, because if you look at it more closely, it seems to me that we're continually following a path from a point of identification with something that's happening in our life, something in our body, an emotion that's uncomfortable, or a memory, a thought, being distracted by visual phenomena, as you're saying, getting engrossed in the conditioned reality, and then making a journey back to this. When we're here, we see there's no path to follow. It is gateless. This is always wherever we are. It's never in the future. We never need to be somewhere else. It can never be somewhere else, or we wouldn't be able to experience it. It's always right where we are. But somehow it still seems to be a process of making that journey again and again, returning here, resting, being here, and then at some point thinking, I'm no longer here, which doesn't mean we're not here. That's what's intriguing. Like, we think I'm not here, and we believe what we think. The amazing thing about thought, it can be so convincing.
Yeah, well,
that's one
of our biggest problems, isn't it? We believe our thoughts, and if once we investigate that, and that investigation, you know, am I my thoughts? Am I, you know, why do I identify with these thoughts? Can I grasp a thought? Can I hold a thought? Are they my thoughts, or are they thoughts appearing? You know. And we very quickly realize that thought has no substance, that thought is something that is simply flowing by, and there is nothing there to identify with. Yet we fall for it time and time again, because we're trained into that from early, you know, from birth, really, or prior.
But it's beautiful to point to thought in the way that you are, because it is such gives us such direct access into this by asking those precise questions. What is thought made out of? What's the medium within which thinking happens? We can't find it. We go through it and can't see anything. We move into this. Where do thoughts come from? Cannot say. When a thought disappears, where does it go? Or even with experience, right now, this experience that a second later isn't here, what happens to it? Where does it go? So they're wonderful pointers, because I think it's easy for a lot of people to take that journey, ride on a thought
Mm.
and see, I can't say what this is made out of, where it's come from, where it goes.
And in the same way, we can investigate the body. You know, am I this hand? Are these fingers? You know, who am I? And of course, you know, Ramana was the great advocate of that form of Advaita with the question, who am I? And, very beautiful. Again, we can follow these inquiries, and it seems to me, and you can share a little more on this because your knowledge is greater, Mahayana Buddhism is the Buddhism of emptiness or non-duality. So it seems very, very similar to the Advaita path or the modern non-dual path. Again, I'm using words which are could be confusing. So when I mean path, I think all these paths end once we enter that gateless gate and understand the pointings that they offer us. But with Mahayana Buddhism, this is a pointing that I'm not so familiar with. I'm more familiar with the Advaita path. So perhaps you can share some of those specific pointings from that perspective with us.
Well, a lot of it is very similar. It's self-inquiry, looking for where is the I, where is the me. And while the terms that are used to identify where we arrive at through that inquiry, in the case of Advaita, they will talk about the Atman, the self, the transpersonal self, self beyond the individual ego. And in Buddhism, they'll talk about anatman, no self. Non-dualistically, they can't be different because we don't have two different things here. They both open into a space that is beyond unity and division.
Yeah,
beyond division, but also beyond even the notion of oneness, because one is a dualistic idea, one rather than many. So they do, it seems to me, they both open into the space we're talking about and sharing together here.
Which is probably why non-dual is translated as not two. It's not translated as one, it's translated as not two. So, which is interesting, isn't it? And again, there are many translations that point towards what cannot be divided.
But another important point here, I feel, is to also see that when we talk about not finding the self, either through sort of an Advaita path or a Mahayana Buddhist path, Zen path, but when we arrive at that point, it's not an intellectual conclusion. There is no self. I am not here. Because we can't say what is not here. It goes beyond being and not being. It goes beyond I am and I'm not. I can't say I'm not because I cannot find what it is or who I am not.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's and very well put into words, because you feel and sense that is experienced, but to then put that into words can be incredibly challenging. And you know, I often find here, you know, words can create knots around something which experientially is so clear and so open and so free.
Exactly. Nothing goes missing. Nothing drops out of the picture in the non-dual space.
All is as is. Beautiful.
Right. Nothing is added, nothing is taken away. In Mahayana, you have a phrase that comes up quite frequently: profound unthinkability.
I like that.
That's lovely, isn't it? Profoundly unthinkable.
Oh yes, I think I might use that.
Yeah. So give up. Don't even try, because we are bound to fail.
Yeah.
In trying to put our minds around this.
I was in a conversation with a group of people the other day, and someone was asking me about, you know, what I'm thinking. And I just had to say, I've given up thinking. Because who thinks?
Yeah.
And when you're in this space, who is thinking? Is there thinking? It's profoundly unthinkable. I love it. Yeah, very good. So from Canberra now, you're still offering some of your work, aren't you?
I am. At the moment, I'm offering a course, a series of meetings that are called Dancing in This. This being this. And the dancing in this is doing exactly what we're doing now. We are dancing in this. So it's doing what we're doing in a group of about 30, 40 people coming together for meetings of an hour and a half and doing what we're doing.
Beautiful. I do something similar. I just simply call it satsang because that just was the word, but I like dancing in this. And a group of us come together in the same way, just to be together. And it's wonderful for people to have a supportive environment to inquire together, to look at the pointings together, and to offer some clarity around those pointings, and to rest together in this openness. And sometimes, you know, it is a tangled web we weave with the mental faculties we're offered. So coming together in a place where we can actually have a profound conversation and sharing is actually quite a rarity in the world. So wonderful that you're offering that, and you know, my small offering as well. And I think we need, you know, those will be drawn to whomever to find that place where they can rest in inquiry and in a peaceful presence together.
Just the gentle, reflective, contemplative inquiry is a beautiful space to presence, to just be in and be in that flow, and be in the field where the complicated interpretations, as you're saying, that we can weave can be undone through inquiry and just naturally as a consequence of being in a shared communal field.
And that's something you talk about, which in your book Radiant Mind as well. And And you know, in the yogic field, which I've sort of come through, we call that darshan, or just simply resting in the resonance of a space of open emptiness and peaceful presence, and that can, you know, create this beautiful ripple and this vibration that will you know, encompass all that are within that space and beyond. And I think that's something that you bring to your work as well, isn't it?
It happens through the work. It does, yes.
And I you know, I find being available for that work and dedicating to that work itself is a reminder here always too, and a you know, constantly reconnecting to that field is something that not only, you know, supports others, it supports everything. It supports that field and the strength of that as well.
Right, and as you're saying, when we're here seeing so incontrovertibly that we can never not be here, we can think that we do, that we devolve into a contracted space and we become reactive and something is missing and we have to discover whatever it is to ultimately come back here, because this is the only point, the only space where there is true, real resting, where there is nothing more that we can do, nothing more we need to do, nothing more that we can do, because here we don't need anything. That's why it's happening. It's happening in this way because nothing needs to be different.
Yes.
So there's no struggle,
And
no
that
energy to displace this and make it something else.
Which is why it's so delicate and precious. And I feel at this time when, you know, outwardly in the world there's this turbulence being manifesting in the world of duality at the moment, which is creating for many suffering and pain. The pointings here could offer so much solace, could offer so much peace. For when we rest here, right now, in this, there can be no harming. There's only a sense of profound love and openness and compassion. So if more of us so-called beings were resting in this wavelength, then the disturbances or the ripples on the global consciousness would perhaps calm and come back to a place of love rather than chaos and suffering.
But here also we can appreciate that there's nothing to accelerate, that this isn't a process, that this is the space at the end of the path, beyond even the notion of evolution, and that this unfolds and is accessed in the time that it is. if we try to push the natural evolution, the way that this unfolds within any one person, or the way that this unfolds nationally, globally, we're no longer connected with this. It's an event. It's something that happens within this. So it's really just being able to trust when we're here as well. Being able to trust that everything is unfolding.
As it
and
should.
People are realizing, gaining a recognition of this in a way that's completely consistent, precisely in tune with their mind-body history.
Yes.
So also what you're saying at the beginning, that this is like ordinary mind. This is not something, it is the most remarkable thing. In Buddhism, it's the wish-fulfilling gem, wish-fulfilling jewel. Offers us everything we want because we don't need anything. But also not making it into something spectacular, something incredible, because then it's no longer this.
Yes. There was a moment I remember quite a number of years ago where I had a complete and utter snap. I could call it a dropping of the veil, or a breakthrough of understanding. For it can be very confusing when you're feeling you're on a path, and that the individual is going to attain a state. And that had held an aspect of bondage here, and had limited the true understanding that nobody wakes up. The individual, separate Saraya that's here was not going to achieve anything. It was so much more delicate and simple and ordinary and beautiful and subtle and magical than that there was just a melting of needing anything to be different, and that it was already here. And although that sounds so simple, it was the most profound moment that really allowed the entrance to that slipstream that, of course, is such peaceful presence.
And it's this moment, the moment that you're talking about.
Exactly. It's always this moment. It's only ever this moment. Yeah. All that his story, those stories, they're there, and again, they can be used as pointings, I feel. However, if we get hung up on an event or an experience, then we're missing out on the now, aren't we?
Well, yeah, and in doing this work, unfolding it, as a facilitator, as you know, one of the disciplines, not really the right word, but we're aware of whether we are in the past, in the moment, or in the future, and know that this is always now, in the moment, and never something that happened in the past, never something that may happen in the future, because that's unattainable.
And it's interesting how humanity, to try and understand this great mystery, we've really created time, haven't we? We've created, by observing the cycles perhaps of nature, of the light and the dark, the moon and the sun, and we've created this thing called time, which seems to have bound us into a state of confusion and believing in a future, and projecting out of the only true moment, which is always now.
But I think also being careful, it's the way that we talk, the true moment, the real moment. It's going beyond real and isn't real. And yes, and it's easy for the mind to want to land somewhere, to want to say something about this. So it really goes back to the profound unthinkability of this, going even beyond notions of is not, it's real, it's not real.
Which, that's beautiful. Thank you. Because that's just as, it feels as if just as this space is so refined, so our speech also, as we drop in, can become more refined, and words can be misleading. It just makes me want to say nothing. But we are here to have a conversation, although we'd probably both like to just drop into silence at the moment. Are you still doing any work with universities or?
No, I haven't done that for a long time. No, the work with people of non-dual sharing is something that at least I've experienced happens more easily outside of that environment. But what I have done is taken a close interest in what I'm doing when I'm facilitating this work, so that I can describe the process of dissolving, dismantling constructions, dismantling thought, getting into the flow of dissolution, and how you do that individually and with groups of people, so that I can share my process with other people. So some of my writing, a book called Natural Awakening, is dedicated to describing this one. Yeah, that book. So that's dedicated to describing the process that I use to take people on a journey from being someone, doing something, wanting to get somewhere, to being here in this.
Yeah, and I've spoken to quite a few different teachers who have their own, of course, their own flavour on that. I like yours very much, by the way. It's very beautiful, and I like the delicate nature of it. That appeals to me. I work similarly, and yeah, I enjoyed. I haven't read the book cover to cover. I actually very rarely ever read a book cover to cover, but I've looked at bits of it, and it's beautifully done. Definitely, I'll leave down below on this YouTube and on the podcast how you can get in touch with Peter and also his books. So some of you listeners who may be wondering what that book was, I'll be sharing those as well, because these wonderful resources for those who are feeling the need for some gentle pointing and direction can be very useful. I came myself, it's interesting because I've had a few people on the podcast who have come to their sense of freedom that they experience now through difficulty, some through alcoholism, and overcoming that, which led them into a path, and then of course that path ending as they found this beautiful space. For myself, I came through challenge as well, through first of all a long period of learning and discovering and meditation and teaching, but really the big pointing at the end was with the loss of my son through suicide, which made me look a lot deeper. Perhaps through that grieving, something opened, which was, I believe, his gift to me. However, you've come through a path which seems you didn't have to suffer so much, which is wonderful.
I'm not sure. I wouldn't say that.
Oh, you wouldn't say that? Okay.
No. No, it's been no. Like so many people, a lot of confusion and being really lost. And as I said at the beginning, with Lama Yeshe, were it not for Lama Yeshe coming into the picture for me, I don't know what I felt. I was drowning in samsara, and as he pulled me out of the ocean and dragged me off and said, well, I will take care of you. So were it not for his rescue mission, I don't know where I would be.
Well, that's beautiful. Well, what they say is when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Mm.
Yeah, I've had many amazing teachers myself who I'm very, very grateful to, and still consider myself, open to that learning every day, and grateful for this too, my time here today. Everything is beautifully pointing, always pointing to this. If we're open to see that, then it's an absolutely beautiful thing. So we are coming to the end of our time here, so to speak. Is there anything else you'd really like to share? Because your pointings are invaluable, and I'm sure everyone's enjoying this immensely and finding it very valuable, Peter.
Oh, I feel we really have shared a lot, the depth and the breadth of what we're obviously both doing and where our heart's work lies. So, that's wonderful being here with you.
Yeah, and with you too. So I really do thank you very much, and hope that, I don't hope anything. All is perfect and all will unfold perfectly. So namaste.
Yes, namaste. Namaste. Sadaya.
Join me for upcoming podcasts. And please, if you found this helpful, or you'd like to share a comment or perhaps your own experience, I'd love for you to leave that message down below this podcast. I enjoy reading your feedback, and I'm sure we can all help each other to hold hands, to remain awake, present, clear, and loving. Namaste.